Hi everyone, welcome to this video about how to subtract fractions. So I believe that everything in life, including math, is a lot easier when you love yourself. And one of the ways that I like to give myself a little bit of love is to give myself permission to rest. A lot of times we're like hustling and bustling all over the place and getting lots of things done. And taking a moment to give yourself a rest, even if it's just for 1 or 2 breaths, can really make a big difference in your day. And it can also help you learn math more because you're more relaxed. So take 2 deep breaths, give yourself some love, and let's make this math easy. All right, so when you're subtracting fractions, the process is basically the exact same as with adding fractions, except that you're going to be subtracting instead of adding. So if you haven't watched my adding fractions video yet, I would recommend that you watch that first because it will kind of explain the basics that I'm going to breeze through in this video. So the basic concept is that you're going to subtract the top numbers of your fraction and the bottom numbers or the denominators are going to stay constant. So in this green problem, if you do 2/5 minus 1/5, the answer is 1/5 because 2 minus 1 is 1 and the 5s just stay constant. If you have 7/4 minus 3/4, that would be 4/4 because 7 minus 3 is 4. 2/3 minus 1/3 is 1/3. 3/10 minus 6/10 is actually a negative 3/10 because 3 minus 6 is a negative 3. And if you do 5/7 minus 4/7, that would be 1/7. So basically you subtract the top numbers or the numerators and then you leave the bottom number the same. And I'll explain what to do if you have different bottom numbers in just a second. So if you have the same denominators, or if the bottom numbers are the same, then you can think about it as one of 2 ways. You can either think about it as, like in this problem, you have 2/5 and you're minusing 1/5. So that could be that you're like taking away one of these green ones. Or the way that I actually prefer to think about it is I prefer to think about it as adding the opposite. So if I add a negative 1/5, then basically the negative is going to cancel out one of the positives. So if I were to combine this positive 2/5 with the negative 1/5, this negative 1/5 is going to cancel out this positive 1/5, leaving me with an answer of 1/5. So you can see that you get the same answer either way, whether I do 2 minus 1, I get an answer of 1, or I could do 2 plus a negative 1, and I still get an answer of 1. So you can do it either way. I just prefer to think about it as negatives because it can be helpful when you have more advanced problems. If you have different denominators, then you have to find equivalent fractions that equal the original fractions but have the same denominator. So I made another video about how to find the least common denominator, which in this case is 15. So if you don't know how to do that, go watch that video. And you can also watch my video about how to find equivalent fractions to see how to get from 2/3 to, in this case, it would be 10/15. So if you want more details on that, go and check out those 2 videos. But basically, I would change the 2/3 into 10/15, and I would change the 1/5 into 3/15 using the process of finding equivalent fractions. And then I can subtract those 2 numbers from each other. So I can say 10 minus 3 is 7. Or if you wanted to, you could think about this as 10 plus a negative 3, and you would still get 7/10. And again, I think that's easier than just doing subtraction because when you have more advanced problems, it's easier to work with negatives if everything is just addition. So that's how you would do it if you have different denominators. I kind of breezed through that process of finding the common denominator and finding the equivalent fractions. So I went into more detail on this on my adding fractions video. So you may want to go and watch that video if you're not exactly sure how I did this part of the problem, because I went into a lot more detail on that video. But if you have multiple fractions, the process is still the same. You just need to find a least common denominator for all of the fractions. So you would take the 5, the 3, and the 6 and find a least common denominator for all of those. And again, you can watch my least common denominator video if you don't know how to do that. But in this case, it would be 30. And then you change 4/5 to 30 by multiplying the top and bottom by 6, which would give you 24/30. Then 1/3 times 30 is 10. Or sorry, 1/3 equals 10/30 because you do 3 times 10 is 30 and 1 times 10 is 10. Didn't quite say that right. And I like to think of it as, rather than minusing 1/3, I think of it as adding a -10. So that's why I wrote a plus sign here, is because I'm going to think of it as adding a -10. And then when I do 6 times what equals 30, I get 5. So 6 times 5 is 30. 1 times 5 would be 5, and I'm going to think about that as a -5 because I'm subtracting it. And when I add all of these together, if I go 24 plus a -10 plus a -5, I could add the negatives together first. So like -10 plus -5 is -15. And then 24 plus -15 would be a +9. And that would give me 9/30, and I could reduce it if I wanted to. And you can watch my other video about how to reduce fractions if that would be helpful. But this is one of the reasons why I really like thinking about it as adding a negative instead of thinking of it as subtracting. Because if you think about it as adding a negative, then you don't have to go in order from left to right. Like you don't have to say 24 minus 10, then minus 5. You can think about it as -10 and -5, combine those negatives, and then add it to the positive, which I personally think is a lot easier. So to summarize, when you're subtracting fractions, you basically want to subtract the top numbers after you've made sure that you have common denominators. So if you start off the problem with the same denominator, you can just subtract the top numbers and then you've got your answer. If you have different denominators, then you have to find the least common denominator and find equivalent fractions for each of the fractions with that least common denominator. And again, I have videos about those if you'd like help with those. And then you subtract only the numerators. And you can think about that as adding a negative if that's helpful for you. And then you can reduce if you need to, and that's how you subtract fractions. I hope this was helpful. Let me know how easy this was for you in the comments below, and then subscribe for more easy math videos. You may also want to check out my fractions playlist, and if you'd like more help with your math homework, you can go to mathtutoringonline.com to ask a question or book a one-on-one tutoring session. See you soon!